Okay. Hello, we want to welcome you. We want to welcome everyone. Hello, hello. Hello, welcome to the Historical Society St. Patty's Day, post St. Patty's Day meeting. And we have the Queen here today. Queen, stand up, please. Would you stand up? Queen Liz Robbins. She served our community well. She was fabulous. I wish you would have worn your outfit today. It's warm. Yes. I'm filling in for our president, who is at the legislature today. He's busy. And our vice president is skiing the Swiss Alps. So I'm here, and we have a great program ahead, and we're going to go through our business and get that done so we can get to Lisa Carey's program. So Ed Fisher's going to come up and lead us to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ed?
Thank you, Anita. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I want a special recognition to any veterans that are present and invite them during the pledge. Thank you for your service, sir.
You're very welcome.
I know there was a lady was in the United States Navy,
Army.
And Army. Thank you, folks, for your service. All right, and all you veterans, you may render a hand salute whether you have a cap or not. That's current regulations. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ed, and our veterans and all of our members here today. You all received our minutes from the January meeting. You know, we were not really iced out, but we were frozen out of our February meeting. So we had our January minutes. We'll approve them as read. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? I'll second. Okay, thank you, Julie. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, nay. Okay, they've been approved. Thank you very much. Now, we will have our Executive Director, Liz Robbins. Thank you, Liz. Yeah.
I nearly won my crown today, but actually they took it away from me last night. Next year. Thank y'all for being here today. And did he mention that we got snowed out, iced out for our February program? The wonderful Kane West from the Hot Springs National Park was going to give that program about how the park is famous for promoting public health and the government-free bathhouse, lots of interesting things. We're rescheduling him. He will be back in the fall, but we're not sure yet which month in the fall, but we'll have that in the paper. We'll have it on our Facebook page. And of course, if you're a member, you'll get our wonderful newsletter and you'll get all that information ahead of time. Another reason to join. Next month,
I will take this opportunity to make an announcement about that as well.
Yes.
The library is going to be partnering with Hot Springs National Park, including Ranger Kane West, to have a new monthly or bi-monthly series. So that's going to start Wednesday, April 23rd. So every other month, there will be a program series with the National Park. And this one's going to be a little different than what the Historical Society.
The program he gives us is not one of the programs he'll be giving in that series. So we'll have our own original Kane West thing. But the series they're talking about is going to be wonderful.
Yes, so instead of that specific program being rescheduled, this will be an introduction to the history of how Hot Springs became a national park and protected land. So that's going to be April 23rd, every other month, the fourth Wednesday. So, and that kind of.
What time of day will it be?
At the same time, 12 p.m. Just on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday.
And for anyone who has not seen the speaker, Kane, he is fabulous. I've seen him here and at another venue, he's fabulous.
Yes. And we're going to have another fabulous speaker next month here on April the 15th. Easy to remember, tax day, be here. Journalist Cassidy Kendall is going to give our program about her new book, Secret Hot Springs, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. Doesn't that sound like fun? Cassidy's been a reporter for the Sentinel Record and is also the creator of the online media outlet, the Hot Springs Post. And like I said, she's also a bundle of energy and a ton of fun, so I think you'll enjoy what she's discovered about Hot Springs. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to have Lisa Carey with us. Now, of course, she was born and raised in Arkansas, the daughter of Ron and Betty Coleman. She got degrees from Trinity University and the University of Arkansas, and then she worked for the Murphy Oil Corporation as its employee communications director from 1993 to 1998, and then she worked as the director of development at National Park College. And of course, you just can't think of downtown without thinking of her wonderful shops, All Things Arkansas and All Things Natural. She's just amazing. And she's recently written a book, Quartz in Their Veins, A History of Quartz in the Ouachita Mountains and the Legacy Created by the Coleman Brothers. Now, you can't get a copy yet, because it's not out in print yet, but it's going to be, so keep your eyes open for that. And please welcome the wonderful Lisa Carey.
Thank you all so much for coming here today and for choosing to come here. We've been laughing recently because my friend Darla and I run together, and her son is in middle school, and my husband is her teacher. And she told me the other day that there was a vote in the class, and the vote was who would they prefer to have come be a guest speaker in middle school. The middle-aged wife of Mr. Carey, who knows a lot about crystals, or the rock star son of Mr. Carey, who goes on tours and plays heavy metal music. And I got one vote. So I think we need a picture of this today just to show everybody that some people do want to know about quartz crystals. And one of the first people that came in today was asking me specific questions about crystals and about growing up in the Coleman family. So first of all, yes, it was pretty fabulous growing up as part of the Coleman family. I was born and raised in Jessieville, Arkansas, which is really pretty much the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to do there, but there are mines. There's red peanut butter clay mines everywhere, and there are crystals under the ground, and that's the world I grew up in. I grew up in a world where I might be next to somebody who hasn't bathed in a week, and we literally might be on the phone with Donald Trump or President Clinton. Either one can happen at any point in time. And it was pretty cool, I'm going to tell you that. So that's really what we're going to talk about today, is really more about quartz crystals, about the mines, and about how you find them, what they mean, all of the good stuff. I don't have enough time to go through it all, which is why you're going to need to buy the book, Quartz in Their Veins. Just a little something. So first of all, my great-grandfather, Charlie Coleman, was digging crystals out there back in the 30s and 40s. He'd go out and he'd put a pick over his shoulder and he would walk from right there on Highway 7, which of course was still dirt roads at the time, and he would walk 2 miles to what is now known as the Old Coleman Mine. And he would dig and he would come back at the end of the day. That's really the world that we grew up in. And in the 1940s, the mines were taken over because they needed quartz oscillators for World War II. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit so that you're going to better understand what happened. There were radios in airplanes from the early 1900s on, but the rate that they could transmit to was maybe up to a mile. But meanwhile, the Curies, as in Pierre Curie, radioactivity, they discovered what is called piezoelectricity. Piezoelectricity means that you're going to press against something and it's going to start creating an electric current. Quartz crystal is an excellent oscillator for this. And by the 1940s, they started making radios in cars and using them. And people were like, this is going to be kind of a big deal. And then they needed them for the airplane in World War II. The radios they were using at that time were like CB radios, and they might be literally riding a horse or they might be on an airplane, but suddenly, instead of only being able to reach a distance of 1 mile, they were able to reach a distance of 3 miles. Huge game changer, except for they didn't have enough quartz. So whereas we all were just going out going, ooh, this is pretty, let's get some. They needed it, and they needed it fast, and a man named Hugh Miser was in charge of finding out how to get it. And the U.S. government, due to wartime efforts, took over 6 mines in the Jessieville and Mount Ida area. One of those mines is the Old Coleman Mine, and it was deemed to be the world standard, and they were taking all of it they could get. It's amazing to read about. I don't remember all the details right now, though it's in the book. So just know they needed it all over the place. And they also were using what is called the Miller Mountain Mine now. That was actually originally owned by Mr. Bauer that made the Crystal Cave down on Whittington. He's the one who originally owned that. They had the McCurl Mine and a couple others, Collier Creek. The reason that the Old Coleman Mine was such a big deal was because it had the clarity needed, because they had to be optically clear to the eye, 75% or more optically clear. Not many had that, but the Old Coleman Mine are clear and pretty. So are the McCurl Mine. The problem with the McCurl Mine is they also have what is called internal twinning. And internal twinning makes them even prettier. It makes them kind of reflect like mirrors coming out. Not good for those wafers that they needed for piezoelectricity though. So that's what they were doing. So they're getting them out. And these people that have made maybe $1,000 a year are suddenly making way more than that because they're digging these and it's used for the war, but they're also chopping them off. And so, because they only need the clear part, the rest of it has to go away. They're chopping them off and they're throwing it away. There are huge piles in a 1951 book about geology in the area. You just see piles and piles of discarded crystals. So kind of keep that in mind as you're thinking about things. And that's what they're used for. Finally, the war ends. The government gives everybody back their mines. And so the Coleman family is leasing what is known as the Old Coleman Mine. It is officially known as the Blocker Lead number 4. But we're going to call it the Old Coleman Mine probably from here on out. My great-grandfather's keeps going. Then my grandfather, Frank Coleman, starts mining it. And they pay $200 a year for the lease. And then they also get a portion of sales, which is just kind of crazy because when my grandmother was in charge of it, she had to actually go back and earn her GED in the one class that she nearly failed was math. And yet she was the one in charge of this and did it really well. She was like, I could do those sums. It was algebra that was a problem. We get to 1969. And at that point, my Uncle Jimmy is also mining with Frank and Judy Coleman. I mean, Judy's not really mining, but you can find her in a whole lot of the pictures. And at that time, Dirks, who owns the mine, sells out to Weyerhaeuser. And Weyerhaeuser says, I think this is worth a little bit more than what you guys are paying. And they increased the amount to such a point that Frank Coleman said, we can't do it. This is not possible for us to do, and maybe we can do something else. And instead, Weyerhaeuser said, nope, we already have somebody ready to buy it. And so in 1969, let me make sure I get the right order on everything, Quartz Processing Incorporated out of Japan buys it. They're wanting it for the oscillators, so they still don't want to get the specimen grade quartz. They only want it for computer processing. Now somehow, and this is what actually was really interesting to me as I was researching for the book, my Uncle Jimmy, who passed away about 2 years ago, but he managed to have people working there. And I'm an honest person. My uncle might have skirted what is legal and what is illegal on occasion. I would not be too surprised by that. So somehow they were still getting some crystals out during that time. There's a whole description of how that happened in there. I'm not sure that it's completely above board either, but nevertheless, they're still working. And meanwhile, the guy that's in charge from the Japanese company is like, I'm not making enough money. One reason he's not making enough money is because in the 1970s, they start being able to grow quartz crystal. And so you take a tiny little sliver of quartz, silicon dioxide, and you put these little things on it, and there's an not an oscillator, there's a conclave, what's that thing called? A thing. It's a big autoclave. Thank you, Marcy. Autoclave, and they grow it. And so it's still the same chemical composition. It's what they need. But it's also a lot less expensive to make, and it keeps the value of naturally grown quartz crystal higher. So his market was going way down, and so he said, I got to sell this. Meanwhile, my parents or my uncle and my dad have a customer. His name is Gunther Bromont. Gunther is from West Germany, high up in the West German government, and he's been a client for years. They've been buying lots of quartz crystals. And Gunther says, I think this is a pretty good idea. I think I should own this mine as well as the West German government. Jesseville, Arkansas had a crystal mine owned 49% by the West German government. Just kind of crazy to think about. And you can actually find in the U.S. Geological Bureau information where they talk about the transfer going. Uncle Jimmy, again, somehow still has people working there for Gunther. I mean, when we say for Gunther, I think it was for Jimmy, but you get the idea. He's still got people digging crystals over there. And then Gunther says, I'm going to have to split this up a little bit. And so the Canadian government or a Canadian company, not the Canadian government, called Sedimix comes involved. And they start digging. They can't make it work. So you got Gunther, you got the West Germans, you got Canadians all kind of in this joint partnership. And along in 1985, they say, still not going to work. Now, guys, by this time, I'm in high school. I know I don't look like it, but I was already in high school then. And my dad starts going, now, wait a minute. They've been destroying the crystals. They're not using them for what they are meant for. They are meant to be preserved, to be cherished like artwork would be. And they're doing it at a place called the Old Coleman Mine. The Colemans have never actually owned it. So my dad he put his house up, he put our cars up, he probably had me on loan, I don't know. He did everything that he could do, and he takes it all to the bank, and he says, here's what I have for collateral against what would be a $3 million loan. And the bank says, nope, we don't think so. So my dad, not to be one to be told no, doesn't take no as an answer. First, he talks to a man who happened to have the same birthday Dad did. That should have been my dad's first clue this wasn't going to go well. And if my dad would just give him $30,000, he would make sure that they got the mine. My dad gave him $30,000 with the loan officer saying no. He did anyway. The man disappeared. My dad has never seen his $30,000 again. Again, you would think maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to go ahead and let this one go. No, my dad does not. At that point, my Uncle Jimmy starts going down to his mama and my dad's mama, my Mama Judy, and they were like, please talk him out of this mess. He is going to use all of our money. We're going to use all of our money trying to get him out of this. This is not going to go well. And my Mama Judy, who I would just like to tell you guys, she is on hospice now, but she's 99 years old, and I got to interview her extensively for this book. And as she told me, I said, now, Jimmy, there's no way he's going to be able to do that. Again, we don't tell my dad no. My dad went and negotiated directly with the companies in order to secure a loan. In doing that, they created a contract that was, as my dad said, as thick as the Sears Roebuck catalog, and literally had in there how many magazines they were allowed to have in an office. And my dad, at that point, had his check from the bank and everything. And he tore it up and he walked out of the room and told them he'd be ready when they had a one-page agreement. And the next day they had a two-page agreement. And so my dad signed it. And so in 1987, my dad bought the Old Coleman Mine. And for the very first time, it was part of the Coleman family. I would also like to tell you guys, if you haven't heard me speak before, in 1989, really when he was really getting going, I was going to college. And I needed money to go to college. And I was a little concerned that there might be some issues because it was really all about me instead of all about the crystals. But obviously I made it through college. My uncle did actually pay for one semester of my college when my parents did not have money. They went ahead at that point. They start mining at all times. My dad was like, the more I can dig, the better it's going to be. And he had talked to a guy who had dug for Sedimex and Geomex. And he had said, I know where three pockets are. So those two men, Daryl Crumpton and Ron Coleman, went together and dug night and day for 3 months because they had to make payments of $65,000 regularly. And they needed to be able to make as much money as they could as quickly as possible. The average temperature that year, and I don't remember the exact number, but during those 2 months was about 25 degrees. So you dig up the crystals and you put them in baskets. The baskets would literally freeze to the ground. And that's what they were doing. They go out, they make just enough money. Dad made it where the payments were due right after their yearly trip to Tucson. So for those who don't know, every year, my family actually owns another place out in Tucson, Arizona, because there's an international gem and mineral show there. And it's cheaper to own a place than to ship your crystals out there every year. And you make the bulk of your money in Tucson every year. And so he was trying to get ready for that. And then their payments were due right after Tucson every year, and then one other time. By the way, he said his house payment was due that way too. I don't think you can do that nowadays, but that's how he was actually paying back then. No idea how he's going to make it. My grandmother is sure he's going to fall flat. They're going to have to save him. My uncle is kind of propping him up because my uncle is brilliant and he knows how to lend crystals as needed. Matter of fact, I never thought until I was writing this book, how is my dad selling crystals before that? Like when you grow up, you just have them. And so I started asking questions. I asked my brother. He said, I think they came from Mount Ida. And indeed, they got some from John Burroughs out in Mount Ida. But what was really happening was Dad was getting them directly from the Old Coleman Mine when Jimmy was getting them somehow from there. And then Uncle Jimmy had also bought in 1971 the Miller Mountain Mine that had belonged to the Bowers before that. And so Dad was buying on paper the crystals. So Uncle Jimmy would give him the crystals. Dad created a whole wholesale building and they were selling them. He never paid for them, which becomes important in this story. Worked really well for Dad for a long time. They got to, I don't remember the actual year, but it was I wrote it down, look at that. In 1989, a woman named Guru Maya, a guru from New York, she's head of the Siddhapath Yoga, came to our home. As a matter of fact, she was on a vow of silence, couldn't speak, gave me a gold bracelet. I thought she was fabulous. And they met, they wanted to go meet with Uncle Jimmy, but Uncle Jimmy was like, I don't have what you need. So they met with us for several days. They had boots there for her. That was just insane, the things that we did for this person. Afterwards, they come back and they said, we want everything you have. And we want everything that you can mine for the next 3 years. So even though it's my father's business and not my uncle's, and this is why none of you know which Coleman is involved at which time, because we don't know either. Even though it was my dad's mine, they had come to my uncle first. He's the one who met with them to negotiate. If you remember, I told you that the mine cost $3 million. Guru Maya paid $3 million for the crystals. And my dad at that point still had to make insurance and payroll and everything else, but the payments for the mine were off the table as an issue from there on out. In my dad's world, in our world, we believe that's totally a God thing. So I want to let you know that. And then Dad's like, if they're buying everything for the next 3 years, we got to get with it. We had out at our house these trailers, and the trailers had crystals for days in them. I mean, just one of my cats got stuck in one for 3 days. That was a traumatic event. They're doing all of this, and then it comes. Uncle Jimmy came to my dad about 1.5 years later and said, they're still going to honor their first agreement. They don't want the other crystals anymore. And my dad said, what do you mean, Jimmy? Like, I got all these crystals. What am I supposed to do? But my dad's, he's with it. He starts calling people. And he's like, all right, we're going to make some deals. And then my Uncle Jimmy says, tell you what I'm going to do. You know how you owe me about $1 million on paper? My dad is like, it's not feeling like this is a good conversation. And Uncle Jimmy said, I'm going to take those crystals and we're going to wipe out your debt. And my dad said, I think the crystals are worth more than that. And Uncle Jimmy said, I don't think you're in the dealing kind of business right now. And so at that point, Uncle Jimmy did indeed take those other crystals. But again, my dad was out of debt. And so he has been able to move forward. They opened up the Coleman's mine for public digging after that. They've got zip lines there. And we're going to go from that to talk about the mine itself and public digging. I was asked before this where the best place to dig is. Now, obviously, I think it's the Old Coleman Mine, but it really is the Old Coleman Mine. So Uncle Jimmy's Miller Mountain Mine is still open for public digging. I think it's $10 a day. You find all you keep. They don't maintain it out there. So when you find the quartz crystals, it's a more difficult experience. You might need a 4-wheel drive to get there. I have heard that they have made the roads better recently, but I haven't been out there to see that. Meanwhile, there are great mines out in Mount Ida. I'm not telling you not to go to them. Matter of fact, I think you should go to all of them. I think it's the Wegner's has phantoms, which is like a ghost outline of a crystal inside a crystal. Coolest thing ever, right? You should go do that. But at the Coleman Mine, all you have to do is drive out 2 miles past Hot Springs Village. You take a left at the sign. You go up to the mine. You're right there. You can zip line, you can go back and forth to your car. You find, you keep everything you find, $25 a day. How do you find stuff, you may ask? Because people ask me this all the time. Now here's the thing, you can't not find quartz crystals. They're everywhere. If you have ever been hiking out in this area, you've seen quartz. When you see any of the white bands that are out there, that's quartz. Most of the time what you're seeing has not been crystallized. When it's crystallized, it has 6 sides, and you can count them. And then there's a point on one end. If it has a point on both ends, that's called a double terminate. But they're everywhere. They're all over. And in the mine, they're just everywhere. And we need them not to be in our way. Because what we're doing is we're digging. And I say we like I'm doing it. I'm so not doing it. But it's a big open pit mine, red peanut butter clay everywhere. And you've got to get that clay out of the way so that you can get to the crystals. So what you're looking for, first of all, is what's called a vein, just like a vein in your leg. It's going to be a white vein going down in the mine. That's a crystal vein. It is formed with hot silica water that has formed over time. I can go into a whole thing about that. I have notes in case I don't know what I'm talking about. I got notes. But I don't think we have enough time to do that right now. So you've got those, and then that vein eventually is going to pocket out. And I want you to think about that. All of you have heard of a geode, right? Okay, a geode has a hard outer crust, and then the crystals form in towards each other. In a pocket, there's no hard outer crust, but the crystals still form in toward each other. And that's where you want to be when you're digging. Everything else is, if they took time to take the crystals just out of the mud, it would cost more for the crystals. They wouldn't be in with the best ones. It's just not worth their time and energy. So they haul truckloads at a time up to what is called the tailing area. And that's what tourists get to go through. You can ask them, they'll tell you which ones came up recently. You either want what just came up or you want what's been there for a while and nobody's looking at it anymore so that you can get down under it. You can dig. I mean, some people make a living going out there and digging. I tend to take the approach of walking along and I look down and I see something black reflecting back at me and I go, there's a crystal. And it just looks black because of the red clay mud. When you pick it up, it's going to be clear, okay? It is not going to be purple. It is not going to be yellow. It is possible that it could be a slight smoky color. So purple quartz is called amethyst. It is still a quartz variety. I mean, I have found one piece of amethyst in my life that came out of the mine. Generally, it doesn't happen. At the diamond mine, you may find small pieces of amethyst. Citrine is yellow quartz. Again, you're not going to find that. If you find some that has yellow looking on it, they call that a golden healer. Between you and me, that's really just where some of the iron from the mud really hasn't come off of it, but it's pretty. So those are you're not going to find those. Occasionally, you're going to see smoky quartz. Smoky quartz is going to be a gray to a black color. We also make it that color. So if you're out and you're about to buy a piece of smoky quartz and it's a dark black color, it probably wasn't made that way by God. If you want to know if it was, you can hold it up to the light. And if it's a variety of colors, like it doesn't stay a solid color, then it's natural. If it's a solid color, that baby's been irradiated. And so in order to irradiate them, and I know I'm going fast, I'm trying to get you a lot of information. In order to irradiate them, back when they first started doing this, under the table, they shipped them to an Air Force base in a truck and left them for irradiation for 24 hours, and then they would come back out and drive it out of there and pay them under the table. And then they could not use the smoky quartz for 2 years because if you put a Geiger counter on them, they were truly radioactive. Now, my uncle told people that they came out that way, and he occasionally would send them to be irradiated with mud on them so that when they opened them, people would be like, oh, yes, it's real. Meanwhile, my brother one time told somebody that it's because they mined them at night. And they believed that too. So, you use some discernment on what you're looking at there. But that's what you're looking at. Now, here's another thing about the quartz crystals that you find six-sided. You can tell which mine they're from. And I bet you can tell that. Darla and Marcy have handouts for you guys to share around. You've got, yes, that's
Tell me what to do.
the brown boxes.
Okay.
If you'll just kind of go through the crowd and hand some over so that they can be looking at them.
Are we trying not to touch the actual crystal?
You can't hand out the other one, just the brown box.
Just the one.
Not
That's
the,
what you're saying.
yes. This is what happens when you put people in charge and don't pay them, but they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So what you're gonna see inside these boxes is 3 crystals. One of them is gonna have an O on it. The O stands for optical grade. You're going to easily see that that baby is clearer and prettier than the other 2. That's a high grade of quartz crystal. That's really what collectors want. That's what you're after. You want the good stuff. Then you're going to see one with a C on it, and you're going to see one with an M on it. The one with the C on it came from the Coleman Mine. That's the one that my dad owns. And you're going to see that that's really pretty. And you're like, oh, it's so shiny and nice. And then you're going to look at the one from the McCurl Mine, and you're going to go, oh, that's pretty too, but it's almost like it's got a little film over it. Very common for the Miller Mountain Mine to have almost a residue of some sort on it. All the mines have different personalities to them. At Collier Creek, they're very small needle-like crystals, so that those who are around them, including the grand old man of quartz, Oka Stanley, he said, man, if you've been around crystals at all, it's really easy to tell. And that's, you don't have to know what the differences are to be able to look at this and say, obviously, there are differences. And really, that's all I want you to do is to be able to look at it and go, yeah, there are some differences in that. And then there's the grand poobah of all quartz crystals, and that's what Darla was trying to do a minute ago. There is also what is called the McCurl Mine. Back in 1984 and 1987, my Uncle Jimmy opened 2 pockets, 84 and 87, at the McCurl Mine, and they found what is known around the world as the highest quality quartz crystals ever found. They are phenomenal. There's no not knowing what you're looking at. You immediately say, what in the world has happened? It's stunning. I was in Houston a few years ago. We were there actually to see Fabergé eggs, but we had to walk through the mineral part. And I had told my husband, I was like, oh my goodness, stop, there's a McCurl. And he's like, what are you talking about? And across the room, illuminated with a black light, it was just this most amazing thing I've ever seen. I happen to have these that Darla and Marcy are showing to you right now because a client of my dad's actually has passed away. So I have 13 of them that are at my store right now. Feel free to come by to All Things Arkansas. I'll show them to you. I'll tell you all about them. They are, and those that Marcy and Darla are holding, not including the fact that they're on a veil or anything, are worth about $1,000 each. That's really where they start out. I don't even know how to explain it. They're just stunning. Despite that, there is not a McCurl crystal at the Smithsonian Museum. There are, however, not 1, not 2, but 3 pieces of Coleman quartz there. And I know this in part from talking to the Smithsonian at great length as we researched the book. In 1951, they purchased from Charlie Coleman the original cluster that is there at the Smithsonian. It's about this big, huge points on it. The Coleman Mine is known for having large crystal points, larger than any of the other mines. So generally, that's another thing. If you see a big cluster and it's got big points, if it's from Arkansas, it's probably from the Coleman Mine. So they have that one, and then they have another one that's really large and kind of broken next to that. That is from Mount Ida. They got it at a similar time frame, and they've had those for years. They also have, not out for display, but they have a small Arkansas Herkimer. And if you've heard of Herkimer diamonds, those are quartz crystals. They're little double terminates, points at both ends, and they look a little diamond-like, and so they call them Herkimers. And when they form like that here, we call them Herkimers. So they've got that. They don't have that one out on display, but it's really cute. And by the way, that's what my mother likes, is the little double terminates. So whenever my brother, my nephew, or my dad go out mining, they often bring little double terminates to my mom at the end of the day, which I then, after a few years, sell a few of them at the store with provenance, and my mother had them because, how many do you need, my mother says. So that's what an Herkimer is. And I forgot where I was going with this little story, the Herkimers. Smithsonian, thank you. Thank you.
And We have one picture in the paper, you know, with you and.
Yes,
And she said these were big at the Smithsonian. They're huge.
yes, that's the one,
Beautiful, and one is at the entrance to.
that's where we're going right now. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
they're
I needed the
amazing.
transition, because
Maybe they can find them online.
when you speak without notes, you just go for it. I did write a few things down. So back around the time of COVID,
Yeah.
in Tucson, some people from the Smithsonian, well, they were not from the Smithsonian originally, some very wealthy customers came and they saw this amazing crystal and they were like, we think this would be good for the Smithsonian. So at that time, the Smithsonian came out as well. And during COVID, the most recent addition from the Coleman Mine was added to the Smithsonian at the Constitution entrance. And it has a full display. They have a picture of the Coleman Mine in the background. It's photographed millions of times every year. Machine Gun Kelly, who the middle school students would appreciate, he's taken pictures with it. Just an amazing piece. And what you're talking about was, it was during COVID. And they put it out during COVID. So they had a very small little reception, just kind of internally. And then when things loosened up, they had all of the Smithsonian board and invited guests were able to come, including those who bought the piece and that sort of thing. And so my brother and his wife and family went, and then I was invited and I could bring a +1. So most of you would think that I would have brought my husband, which would make sense. But seriously, you'll understand, when we were growing up, it was my cousin Philip and Carmen, those were Jimmy's kids, and Kevin and I, and we were called the Coleman cousins. Philip died when he was 15, when I was 10, and so I brought my cousin Carmen with me. And that's who was in the picture with us. So the picture that was in the paper, if you saw it, is very precious to all of us as a family because it's the remaining original Coleman cousins. And with that, I think I'm right at the point where you can ask me anything you would like at all. What you got?
2 questions.
I got it.
The Coleman Mine area, the Mount Ida area, is there a difference in quality going from one direction to another?
So the
If
quartz,
that makes sense.
I think so. The quartz belt is throughout the Ouachita Mountains. It's 40 miles wide and 120 miles long. The best section of that is the section that basically is around Lake Ouachita. So you've got Mount Ida and you have Jessieville. And for those of you who immediately wonder, like I did, does that mean that we have a lot of quartz that's covered by Lake Ouachita since it was built? I've asked that question at the state geologist, and they have said that yes, there are quartz that are covered, but know that the geological presentation needed for the high quality quartz is primarily still where you can find that. The Old Coleman Mine is literally the world standard for quartz crystal. But again, even as I say that, the McCurl Mine, those 2 pockets that they were in, there's nothing that surpasses those. A lot of it really comes down to what your personal preference is. The value of quartz is determined by size, clarity, and condition of the points. And then there's the part of, and what you like, what's aesthetically pleasing for you.
So we hear movie stars, yada,
Yes.
yada, yada, coming in and buying huge clusters.
Right.
So on and so forth. How do you price those? Do you price those according to quality and all the points you just brought up, or?
Yes, so again, size, bigger it is in general, the more it's worth. Clarity, the clearer it is, the more it's worth. Condition of the points, you need those points to be intact. If they're not, that destroys the value. And then of course, one thing that we really don't talk about and isn't really talked about in the book, rarity comes into play. So like the piece that is at the Smithsonian that Liz was talking about, that's like a $3 million piece in and of itself. And the value of quartz keeps going up. It really is, for most people, much like getting a piece of art. So just like somebody would buy a Picasso, Other people are buying gems or minerals, quartz being one of those.
Thank
Yeah, yes.
I grew up in coal mine country, and when you use the term mine, it means under the ground. Is that where these are, or do you dig on top of the ground?
So at most of the mines in this area, it's what's called open pit mining. It's not real attractive. Yes, it destroys the earth. It's a big hole because of OSHA regulations, and literally people used to die from cave-ins fairly regularly. So now they have to terrace them and that sort of thing. There's an exception to that. Both in the McCurl mine in general has what is known as blind pockets. So whereas you can follow the veins down and get them in other mines, that's not what happens at the McCurl mine. It just suddenly there it is. You don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does happen, they actually are able to get inside that. It's the only mine, according to my brother, the only mine that he's ever dug at where he was down inside like a cave. Yes, Dana?
One of the most beautiful sights I ever saw was when Brady Mountain was adding their last boat docking in the 1990s. And we went up there in the evening. They were cutting the road in to the last boat docks, and they had scraped all that peanut butter place on headlights, and it was just glitters everywhere. So I stopped the car, Bob, I want to see that.
Yes.
And within the next week, prospectors had removed a great deal of that. But it was the most gorgeous, shimmering sight. I just,
I'll get you in just a second. So 2 quick things about the peanut butter clay. One, just for your humor, we had to, we were caked in it growing up. So my mother literally would buy carpet that was colored so that you might not notice all of the clay.
Must be shag.
And it was not. It was really the brown, that 70s and 80s brown weird stuff. That's what we had in order to do that. They now have hardwoods and it's much easier to work with. And then secondly, you were talking about the peanut butter clay. When we built our house in Jessieville, and we do live in Hot Springs now, but we built a house and we needed fill dirt. And for us, dirt from the crystal mine was free. So that's what we brought up. We brought up huge loads of fill dirt. One, we lost all the employees working on our house for 2 days. And they would come up and be like, I found a crystal. Can I keep it? And we'd be like, yes. But 2, then my children would dig crystals on a regular basis. And so they would bring them in. And then about a week later, I would go toss them back outside so that they could find them again.
Perpetual history.
What was the O on that crystal, those crystals you were passing?
The O was for the optical grade, the higher grade. Yes. Other question? Yes, ma'am.
Y'all clean them? I've got some old ones that are.
Yes.
Well, I do.
So we use what is called oxalic acid when we go to clean them. So you bring them up, you spray them off with a water hose over and over and over again, literally just more than you can ever imagine. And then we put them in vats of heated oxalic acid. And that's what takes away that red clay mud. Now, first of all, I would just like to tell you also, when I was in high school, I had a cat. The same one that got locked in the trailers fell in the oxalic acid. And she was fine, and all of her fleas were killed. So there is that. But also, you cannot keep your crystals at that high a heat for that long. It's just impossible. However, you can buy, and I know you can at the Colemans, and I would bet most of the places you can, what is called oxalic acid, and it will tell you how to clean them, and they will be much cleaner than just using water on them.
Okay.
You better tell them to follow the directions carefully.
Follow the directions carefully.
The says, put your goggles and your gloves and do exactly what it says.
And one thing to point out with that too is after you've cleaned them, that water hose that I'm talking about, use that again and again and again. I was talking to somebody the other day who had used oxalic acid but had not cleaned them. If they still have a weird sheen to them that is not part of the crystal, it's because some of that oxalic acid is still on there. Yes, Jerry?
So in Crystal Bridges, you were part of a display there, and it had a mammoth point.
Right.
Was that like the largest one that you all have? And another thing, at the Museum of Natural History in New York, they have a beautiful display of Arkansas quartz. I'm not sure if it's from your mine or not, but I was astounded as a younger person that in their sales room, they had quartz crystals from Arkansas. So, as a young Arkansas kid, that really impressed me, and I wonder if you know anything about those
So
crystals.
almost every museum that has a gem and mineral collection will have crystals from not just Arkansas, but from the Coleman Mine. Not exclusively, but almost all of them. And a whole lot of them then buy crystals to sell from the mine as well. They also do that. Again, we have another place in Tucson. So one of the guys that I buy meteorites from gives me the same meteorites that he gives to the Smithsonian that they sell at their things. So you got to get them somewhere, right? It kind of makes sense that that's the way it happens. And then the ones at the Crystal Bridges are actually not from our mine. They're from a different mine. We just moved literally last week to Belgium, the largest piece that has ever been mined of its quality. It's the size of a pool table. And I personally had thought that it would be fabulous at Crystal Bridges. It's not there. It's in Belgium now. So, yes, ma'am.
You were talking about during World War II where they were mining the crystals for the planes and stuff, all these tops taken off and put aside. Did y'all ever find any use for those, or did they ever become a productive part of reality?
So the tops are what were used for the piezoelectricity for the oscillators for quartz, because in general, the top part of your quartz, where the point is the clearest section. So that's the part they needed.
Okay.
So no, all of the bottoms were just discarded out there. And that really, truly hurt. Like, it hurt my dad's heart. And I think you guys can see when I'm talking, I love this. I absolutely love it. So does my dad. And so did my uncle. They may have different personalities. They may express it in different ways, but it literally, that's why I called it quartz in their veins, because one, quartz is in veins, but because it is absolutely part of our lifeblood. My nephew, Joshua, who is going to be 28, I think, in a couple weeks, loves it like we do. Loves it. And it's great to watch that, because the business will always work best if you truly have a passion for it. It's not easy. So in the 80s, when the metaphysical movement really got going, and they opened up and they made it where people could come in and do government property, and all these people were going to come in and make it rich. And yet when it's all over this many years later, the people that are still in business, Ocas Stanley has passed away. His family didn't continue it. But Don Burrows was one of the original family members. His son is still involved, and the Colemans are still involved. Nobody else has made it over the years. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't crystal supposed to have some magical properties?
So people in the 80s were using it for metaphysical purposes. Quartz crystal, if you believe in that, quartz crystal, people believe has an energy in it. It does have an energy in it. We talked about that with the piezoelectricity and pressing it. Whether it can be used to heal you, that's between you and your crystal and you and your God. But basically, what quartz crystal is believed to be is an amplifier. So if you're using it metaphysically, it will be used in conjunction usually with something else. People will hold them in their hands and meditate with them. That is one. So you've got basically people that use them as collectors. That's who we sell to. You've got people who use it for electricity. That has really been moved on out. And then you have people that are using them metaphysically. And that had a resurgence during COVID. And so you see a whole lot of people now that you wouldn't expect to see. I don't know any other way to say that are starting to use them. I had a sweet woman who was about my mom's age in the store the other day. And she was buying them specifically for something, for health, for wealth, whatever it might be. And let me tell you clearly that when you look at the research and you read any of the metaphysical books, that they will also tell you, here's what we believe that they're going to do for you. In general, that's what they're going to do. Might not do it for you, and you might find it doing something else. And if so, that's just the way it is. And I hear you laughing, and I get it, because obviously I'm very attracted to some crystals, but I'm also attracted to diamonds and other things too. But part of the research is going to tell you that yes, there is a scientific evidence that some changes occur. They believe it may be due to the placebo effect, but scientifically you do see statistical relevance that something is happening for people. Do with that what you will. All right, it looks like we've got probably time for one more question if anybody has one.
No.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
well-
That's fascinating. And Carrie, thank you, hon. And Paul, we want to thank you, the library, for hosting us every month. And also, I want to thank each of you who renewed your membership or got a new one today. We have some brochures back there if you'd like to join. We depend on your memberships to keep going. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.
We only have one box. Somebody. Surely somebody will.